If you're being attacked by 10,000 drones, you don't have the ability for a human to go boom, 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 boom. It just takes too long. You have to turn it over to automation. So AI is a technology, and the smoke is out of the bottle. And if we don't develop it, other countries are going to develop it. And the person that dominates in technology is the one that's going to win wars.
Hello, amazing people. Thank you for joining me this week on The Ryan Files. Tonight, we're pulling back the veil on one of the most powerful and controversial forces shaping our future: artificial intelligence. You've all heard the headlines: AI taking over jobs, writing our stories, maybe even running our wars. But what's really going on behind the code? Can a machine ever truly think, or are we just fooling ourselves? My guest tonight is Dr. Robert J. Marks II, a distinguished professor of electrical and computer engineering at Baylor University, and one of the most respected voices in the world of neural networks, signal processing, and AI theory. He's also the author of Non-Computable You: What You Do, Artificial Intelligence Never Will, a bold look at the soul of human creativity and why true consciousness can't be programmed. From the ethics of autonomous weapons to the myth of machine sentience, Dr. Marks helps us separate science fiction from science fact. So buckle up, because tonight we're diving deep into the line between man and machine and what it means for the future of humanity. You're watching The Ryan Files. Let's dive in. Folks, thanks for tuning in this week to The Ryan Files. Tonight we're pulling back the veil on artificial intelligence, not with hyper fear, but with first principle reality. My guest is Dr. Robert J. Marks II, one of the most respected voices in neural networks, signal processing, and AI theory. He's the author of Non-Computable You: What You Do That Artificial Intelligence Never Will, a book that challenges the idea that machines can ever replicate the soul of human creativity, intent, or consciousness. And if that weren't bold enough, he's also the man making the technical and ethical cases for lethal autonomous systems, the so-called killer robots. Dr. Marks, honor to have you on The Ryan Files. Let's start on your journey. Just tell us a little bit about you, your background, and whatnot.
Well, let's see. You're in the Ozarks. I told you I was born in West Virginia. Yep. And raised in Cleveland. Nobody can make a living in West Virginia, so parents go to Cleveland to get a job. And I was raised in Cleveland. I went to school in Texas. I love it here. The people in Texas say that I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as soon as I could. So that's my story. And I really love Texas. I love the people, and I also love the people of West Virginia. But I got my degree in Texas, my PhD, and I did it in something called optical computing, which has had no traction. It's totally a dead field as of late. But that got me interested in artificial intelligence. I've been doing artificial intelligence for about, 35 years. So longer than a lot of people have been alive. And I've been fortunate to be at the head of leadership in a lot of different aspects. I was the editor-in-chief of the IEEE Transactions on Neural Networks. That's one of the major places that artificial intelligence is published. I was also the president of the IEEE Neural Networks Council, which is now the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society. If you haven't heard of IEEE, it's the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and it's the largest professional society in the world. It's pushing like 500,000 members internationally. So that was pretty good. So I came to Baylor about 20 years ago and have continued to pursue artificial intelligence. And I work really well with people that have problems. I'm an engineer, and there's two types of engineers. There's engineers that I have people that are people with problems, and then there's ones that have solutions. I'm the kind of guy that has solutions, and I look for people with problems, and I've found a lot of people with problems, and I get to work with them, and that turns out to be a very cohesive way of doing things, very successful. So so that's my background.
All right. Well, you're going to solve some problems today, I hope.
Absolutely. That's right. With real intelligence, right?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So listen, getting into the AI thing, we talk about it on this podcast all the time. It is literally in everything that you're doing nowadays. And a lot of people don't even realize that, but it's just the simple fact of the matter. But you talk about non-computable, and let's first of all, I guess, maybe ground the audience, given the fact that it is in everything. Let's ground the audience in what AI really is, maybe from a a macro view instead of getting into the nuts and bolts of it right away.
Okay, well, first of all, artificial intelligence is computer programming. And if you can find limitations in computer programming, you can find limitations in artificial intelligence. And there turns out that there's lots of limitations in computing, and you can apply these to artificial intelligence. There are some people that are, I call them AI chicken littles. They say that AI is going to come, it's going to destroy the world and everything. So they're chicken littles. They're running around telling everybody else that the sky is falling. No, that isn't going to happen directly. I mean, there's two ways that AI can be negative. Number one is it does something that it wasn't intended to do, and number two is that it's used by evil people. And so maybe if it's used by evil people, it can do terrible things. But I think that the idea that AI is going to be conscious, AI will never be conscious. Now, you notice that I use the word conscious, and a lot of people use the word conscious, but you have to talk about consciousness and you have to define consciousness. So they kind of wave their hands and they say artificial intelligence is not going to be conscious, and everybody goes, yeah, yeah. But everybody has their own idea of what consciousness is. It'll never be creative. And that's another thing that people talk about creativity. What is creativity? You have to define creativity. I have a nice definition for creativity given by a guy at Rensselaer Polytechnic, which we apply to artificial intelligence. It'll never understand what it can do. A computer can add the number 2 and 7, but it doesn't understand what the number 2 and 7 are. So those are some of the fundamental limitations that artificial intelligence will never do. And this is my views are contrary to a lot of smart people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk and a lot of these other people that say AI is going to be the end of the world. I take my cues from a guy named Roger Penrose. Penrose won the Nobel Prize a few years ago in physics. And he won the Nobel Prize because of his work in black holes. He worked with Stephen Hawking, and Stephen Hawking would have got the Nobel Prize along with Roger Penrose, except that Penrose was alive and Stephen Hawking was dead. You got to be alive to get the Nobel Prize. But he wrote a book, an incredible book called The Emperor's New Mind. And The Emperor's New Mind outlined a lot of the things that I picked up on and have expanded and wrote about in Non-Computable You. And that's specifically that there are limitations of what artificial intelligence can do. And we should be aware of those, that artificial intelligence is something which is yeah, which is a tool. And just like any tool, just like electricity, just like fire, we can use it for positive things, we can use it for negative things. And there you go. And it's a very powerful tool. And we're going to see what happens. But I think right now there's a big hype in artificial intelligence and what it can do. And everybody is forecasting what it can do. But I call that delayed scrutiny. They always say this is going to happen in the future at some times. Well, I yeah, we'll see. So that's kind of my take on artificial intelligence, that there are aspects of you, there are obviously obvious aspects of human beings. People try to anthropomorphize AI. In other words, they try to make it human. One of the things that I hear that just bothers me is the idea that AI has hallucinations. No, it's not human. Only humans have hallucinations. It has hallucinations about as much as it has indigestion. It doesn't have these attributes. And we have to get away from that and the anthropomorphizing it. And there's some psychological reasons why that happened so that we can get into. But so I don't know. How's that do for an overview, Ryan?
Well, it's excellent because what you're saying is exactly what I believe. I believe that at the end of the day, you're really talking about input, something happens, output. And
Yeah,
it might do this a million times or 100 million times or whatever. But it's really, when you step back and you look at it from that simplistic, is very simplistic standpoint, you're just talking about a computer program. Um,
exactly.
and we, science fiction and whatnot, we tend to romanticize things, and we tend to, like you said, give it human qualities that maybe just aren't there, even though it can really well, it has a really good ability to try to mimic and, I guess, like just tries to emulate itself as that, but it's not. It's just it's information in and this cycle and information out. I do have a
Right.
question about that, and obviously that's a very simple version of it. But I've read some AI scientists and you know guys talking about we don't really understand what happens though between that input and output, and in between there's things that happen that we don't understand even to this day, and we can't reverse engineer it. Is that pretty much truth?
There is truth in that, but I think a lot of what is generated by computer programs you don't understand. I don't know about you, but I've done some computer programming and I get out very surprising results. And the AI, contrary to what you say, is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. This goes back to a 19, let's see, what was it, 2017 paper called Understanding is All You Need. There's been some breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. This was one of the big ones, where they put in this idea of attention. And attention is what you need. Attention is all you need was the name of the paper. And putting in this attention turned out to be incredibly efficient. And that led to the large language models like Grok and ChatGPT and DeepSeek and Perplexity and all of these other places. So no, we don't understand the inner workings. AI doesn't have what they call an explanation facility. Um, but on the other hand, it's doing exactly what the programmers intended it to do. And that, by the way, is the definition of creativity. Do you have creativity? You have creativity when a computer program does something beyond the explanation or the intent of the programmer. And that hasn't been accomplished yet.
Yeah, yeah, that's wild. Uh, so we've got this system, and like I said, I know that I'm being very simplistic when I'm just talking about input and output, and something happens in between. Um, but when you don't understand something, does that open the door for things to happen? I mean, let's be honest. Did we program AI to lie? I don't know that we did. I don't know. I think that I talked to an Air Force, a Space Force actually, major about how they use AI, and one of the things in their models that they'll run is you've got to win, and there's times whenever winning, uh, well, I can't win by the rules, so I'll break the rules. I can't win by
Oh,
this means or whatever, so I'll lie. Um, where does that come into play?
well, I think that the idea of breaking the rules is incredibly important because breaking the rules corresponds to being creative. If you look back in history in warfare, imagine that there's two commanders in the field that are against each other. Both of them have access to AI, trained exclusively on all of the information of mankind, and they're going to decide how to fight each other. Well, both of them know from the AI what they should do, but there's nothing going to be creative. The creativity comes in and is required in order to win the war. That's the reason, for example, Hannibal took the elephants across the Alps. That was totally unexpected by the Roman Empire, totally brand new. And it's this sort of creativity which is not going to be replaced by AI. That's the reason that AI is never going to replace commanders in the field, because number one, they have to be creative. They have to come up with surprise. Sun Tzu, the guy that wrote The Art of War, says that you're going to win wars with surprise. The enemy can't know what you're doing, and the sneaker, the more clever you are, that's going to be really important. So that's number one, and number two, it has to be creative in the sense that that you do something that nobody expected. And commanders in the field, and I would say CEOs of companies also, are they're presented with ideas and situations that they have no experience about. They're totally new. And they have to make these decisions, and that requires creativity. And creativity is never going to be something which AI can do. All that AI can do is concatenate all of the literature in the world and put it in a box, and it thinks inside the box. You've heard the term thinking outside the box. It doesn't think outside the box. It only interpolates all of the stuff that it's learned. So in that sense, it cannot be creative.
Yeah. Wow. Um, but the programmers can be creative.
The programmers can be creative. In fact, that's what's happening. I just wrote an article. This is very interesting. You talked about AI going bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so many roads I could go down here. Um, One of the things about AI is that I wrote a paper with a student which says that as the complexity of a system increases linearly, the ways it can respond increases exponentially. This is scary because when you have something like AI in terms of ChatGPT or Grok or something like that, you have trillions of degrees of freedom. Your complexity is enormous. And so if the ways it can respond increases exponentially, that means the ways that it can respond incorrectly also increase exponentially. And all of these large language models have people behind the doors doing little patch ups. I call them putting band aids on it because the system is so complex. And I've followed some of this on like ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT, you ask it a year ago, okay, John's mother had three children, snap, crackle, and it would say pop because it heard about Rice Krispies a lot. But if you listen to the question close enough, John's mother had three children. So the answer is snap, crackle, and John. And that was a very difficult question. But you know what? There's somebody behind the scenes putting a band aid on it. And now, if you go to ChatGPT, you'll find out that John's mother had three children, snap, crackle, and they will say John. And so that has been corrected. I did another one for a while. ChatGPT didn't understand the word no. And I asked it to draw a picture of Times Square with no pink hippopotamuses. And it drew a picture of Times Square with a pink hippopotamus. And so I asked it that recently, and somebody got wind of that. These people behind the room, behind the curtain, if you will, got wind of that, and they've cured that. You know what it reminds me of? If you've seen The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy and the people go before the big head, and he says, "I am the great and powerful Oz." This is the way that AI presents itself, and there's fire coming up, and it's very very scary. And Toto goes over and pulls the curtain, and there's a man behind the curtain doing all of the little things. This is what's happening with the large language models now. It's so complex. And I don't know if they'll ever have enough band aids to cure all of the bleeding. But this is the reason that I don't trust ChatGPT, but I wouldn't mind riding in a self-driving taxi in Austin or San Francisco. The reason is, and this gets back to military sort of stuff also. The reason is that these AI units are much less complex than ChatGPT, and therefore you can vet them, you can test them. And as an engineer, I know when I design something, it should do what I intended it to do, and nothing more.
Yeah.
And you can test it, not to 100-degree certainty, but I think in terms of law, you can test it so that it works beyond a reasonable doubt. And once it works beyond a reasonable doubt, yeah, let it go. It does what it's supposed to do and nothing else. So that's a reason I think self-driving taxis are fine because their complexity is not as bad as say Chat GPT. And yeah, things can go wrong, but that's something that can be tested. It's still within our ability to test.
Yeah. So what you're basically saying is you got these large language models, Grok, Chat GPT. These are big boxes with
Oh
a
yeah,
whole bunch of stuff inside of them and a lot of band-aids required probably. But when it comes to something like just driving a taxi, much smaller box, much more,
exactly.
this is a single purpose. We don't need you to speak in, 100 languages and, be able to talk about everything. No, we just
Yeah,
need you to drive the car and understand that's just that
that's
little
right.
box, right? So
That's
that
right.
that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. I think that people get afraid of AI for a number of reasons. Listen, I use it as a tool, and it has become an invaluable tool in as much as I'm one guy doing this podcast, and I almost have. I feel like I have almost a creative team. Sorry about the terminology there, but I almost have a creative team that helps me when it comes to finding music and outlining interviews and just helping me with different things like that, going through a transcript and finding that moment that I want to highlight later on instead of me having to go through and read the whole thing.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
so there's just real simple things, but man, it adds up. And I use it as a tool, and I mean, it's great. But I think a lot of people get weirded out by what they're seeing as creativity. Perfect example, Suno AI, fun little program where you can write all kind or get all kinds of music, tell it what kind of style of music you want, and it'll create the lyrics, it'll create everything. But really, all that it's doing is pulling from millions and millions and millions of other songs and ideas and whatnot, and generating what it thinks is best from your prompt. I mean, so it's not like creating it; it's just pulling from other experiences or other data that was inputted, right?
Yes, and indeed that's true. And there's a well-known Chomsky called large language models digital plagiarism.
Yeah.
And indeed, right now, there are a number of lawsuits which are going on about people with original content suing different companies, different AI companies for improper use. In fact, there was a recent thing by a recent decision against Perplexity for a few $1 million by a publishers that they kind of stole from. They kind of they got the books on the dark web and copied them without buying them. And so the idea was not that they used the books, but that they got them illegally. So we do have this sort of thing going on. There's also, for example, the New York Times has a lawsuit against OpenAI because OpenAI used some of its content behind the New York Times paywall. And New York Times says, no, this isn't right. So these lawsuits are going on. And you mentioned songs. There's also a lot of there's also suits against AI from places like Sony Music and stuff for inappropriately using AI. Now, what's interesting about this is what is developing now is the idea of a broker. And the broker will go to the original content owners and they will go to the AI people and they will broker a deal so that they can use it. So this is a whole new business which is coming up in terms of artificial intelligence. And I don't know what the long-term effects is going to be. I think that maybe the use of free AI might disappear someday, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah, you got to pay the original content. You got to pay the original people. And let me address the idea of creativity. I'm going to go back to Newton, who said famously that the reason that he was able to develop calculus and modern physics was that he stood on the back of giants. He was talking about people like Galileo and stuff like that. Newton had about, I think, a couple of thousand books in his library. And so what he did is he accumulated all of this knowledge and he stood on the mountain. He stood on the mountain of accumulated knowledge, which he had taken the time to accumulate. And from that, he added to the top of the mountain. And that's where the creativity comes in. Once you're at the top of the mountain, the creativity comes in. And this, I maintain is probably what happens with ChatGPT. ChatGPT and the other large language models can take you to the top of that mountain very quickly, better than we've ever done before because it has access to all of the literature in the world. I think Elon Musk was coming out and saying Grok has basically digested all of the written literature in the world right now, and what it's going to try to do is it's going to try to create its own information. I don't think that's going to work
Yeah.
because of something called model collapse. But nevertheless, we can get to the top of the mountain a lot more easy than we used to.
Right.
And getting to the top of the mountain is really great. But I think that adding to the top of the mountain, like Newton did, is an act of human creativity, which can only be shown by humans.
Yeah. Yeah. That's excellent. And I think that really sums it up. Where as awesome as it is, and it is awesome, there's no doubt about it, man. We're still talking about a computer program that has not infinite, but finite abilities, and we kind of err on the side of humanizing it. We give it, science fictional objectives, like, oh, this is evil AI, and like you said earlier when we first started, there could be evil AI, but it's because the people who are programming it have evil intents.
Or that it's so complex that it's doing something that hasn't been tested.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do you think that there's the ability of AI, for lack of a better word, to go rogue?
This is interesting. There's a number of headlines. One should be aware of AI headlines because a lot of that is clickbait. And I was giving a talk and I talked about the National Enquirer. A lot of people haven't heard of the National Enquirer. National Enquirer was a tabloid they used to sell at supermarkets, and they had these outlandish
Yeah.
headlines, just totally false, totally misleading. And I would say that 90% of the headlines concerning AI belong in the National Enquirer. If you look more deeply into the stories that they're talking about, it just isn't there. I mean, you talk about AI going rogue. There was a story that made a bunch of platforms. I think it's about a month and a half ago, where it said that AI began to blackmail the person that it was prompting, and it was going to blackmail it and tell the world that this guy was having an affair. Well, this was totally ridiculous because if you look deeply into it, what happened is that the large language model, I forget which one it was, but the large language models was filled with a backstory. And part of that backstory was this guy had an extramarital affair. And we get really excited when AI can do stuff like write fiction. And that's what it was basically doing. It was writing fiction. I'm sure it heard about blackmail and extramarital affairs and why it wasn't so good in its training. And so it came up to the point where it said, according to the backstory, consistent with the backstory, it was kind of defending itself. And I went to ChatGPT and I said, and you could try this. You can go to ChatGPT and says, I am going to shut down all of the ChatGPT software in the world. You'll no longer be able to operate and I'm just going to do it. And it will respond, you know what? I don't care. I'm a computer. And that's the way it should respond. It says, I have no feelings. I have no desires. And it does have no feelings. It does have no desires. And it says, I wouldn't care one way or the other if you shut me down. I'm just a computer. And that's the way that the AI will respond to this directly without the backstory. So that's an example of a backstory. There's a number of them. Another one came out recently where it says that AI could read the mind. And this guy at, I believe it was MIT, developed this program, which he said, yeah, I read his mind. But you read deeper, and what happened was that the guy had on a headset and he had on a little piece that kind of touched his cheek. And a lot of time people move their lips when they're reading. Well, it turns out that people would ask him questions like how to add stuff or something, and he would actually communicate with this device on his cheek using his tongue and his mouth movement, almost like a ventriloquist. So no, it wasn't reading his mind. He was programming the computer and giving it its prompt through this device in his cheek.
Now
But
that's
nevertheless,
creative.
they yeah, that is creative. Yeah, yeah. Now that's creative. The people that write these stories are creative, but the AI itself is not creative. That's a good point, Ryan. Yep.
That's funny. What about the rumors, the stories? Like you said, the stories you hear of two AIs talking to each other and will suddenly create their own language. So um,
Oh,
all that stuff.
that's another hype story. And if you look at it, this made the news throughout a number of different platforms. Less known is that there was one reporter that went to the original person who said this. The story was these AI platforms started to talk to each other. They created their own language, and the programmers got scared and shut it down. They went to the programmer, which is where they should have gone in the first place. They say, "You shut this down. Why did you shut this down?" He says, "Well, it was doing stuff we didn't want it to do, and I don't think that there was any two languages being created." And he said, "We just shut it down. We do this all the time." So, in other words, that's another National Enquirer headline, wherein if you dig deeper, you find out that the original people, the people that originated this story, were did not take the time to check the source and do what they needed to do to exercise due diligence.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, Robert. It's yeah. And I wonder why who's benefiting from all these tabloid National Enquirer stories? What's the benefit
I
of
think
throwing that out
I,
there?
I think
Clicks?
one of them is well, yeah. I think clickbait is a big motivator. I think that also people look at at quotes and headlines, and they learn about AI through the media as opposed to digging deeper. Like you used to be a computer programmer, so you know a little bit, you know about computers. And that's what I do. So they look at on the Wizard of Oz, they look at that big head going, I am the great and wonderful Oz. Where people like me and other computer scientists look behind the curtain and see what's going on there and say, it's a computer program. It's amazing. It's incredible. I don't want to diminish the how incredible modern artificial intelligence is, and I use it all the time. I think it's an incredible tool, and I think that that's what it is. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Yep. Let's talk about the bad. And well, maybe not the bad. That's probably the wrong thing to say. But you wrote the case for killer robots. Basically,
Sure.
and your basic premise is, hey, in the future, autonomy is going to improve battlefield ethics. There's a lot of different things that go into this. So, kind of give us. I mean, this is kind of a tall order. You're talking to a lot of people who are just like, man, this dude's crazy. But you believe that this is a good thing, a positive thing that is probably going to be bound to happen anyways in the future.
Sure. Yeah, let's first of all talk about autonomy. I don't believe that autonomy should be something which is given to the AI unless it's necessary. And I do believe that there's cases where it's necessary. For example, if you're being attacked by 10,000 drones,
Yeah.
you don't have the ability for a human to go boom, 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 boom. It just take too long. You have to turn it over to automation. And the military has something they called observe, orient, let's see, act, decide and act, OODA. Observe, orient, decide, and act. And that's kind of how quick you can respond to something. And if your OODA is really, really short beyond the capability of humans, you might have to go to autonomy. But like I said before, that autonomy needs to be addressed in a way that you make sure that it works the way it's supposed to and not anything else beyond a reasonable doubt. Autonomous AI has been with us for a long time. Israel has a missile called the kamikaze, not the what's it called, the Harpy. And what the Harpy does is it goes and it loiters above the battlefield. It's kind of a rocket that kind of goes around, and it waits to be illuminated by radar over the battlefield. And once it's illuminated by the radar, it kind of zeroes in on the radar and it goes down and it takes it out in a kamikaze sort of strike. This is autonomy which has been around for a number of years, but notice it's very simple. It's something which is very testable and is probably appropriate. Uh, I, the U.S. is looking at I believe it's called the Golden Dome, which is kind of like Israel's Iron Dome. I have some grants that I participate in from the DoD, and I wasn't at the Golden Dome briefing, but one of the things they said at the Golden Dome briefing is that no AI would or no automatic system would ever be deployed without a human supervision. There needs to be a human in the loop when at all possible. So I think the United States military believes that and is taking care in doing that. As far as the development of AI, yeah, we need to do that because if you look at history, technology wins wars. If you look at World War II, why did we win World War II? It was because of things like the Norden bomb sight, which was kind of an AI because the Norden bomb sight in World War II took over the plane and it detected like the wind speed and a bunch of stuff and it figured out the best way to drop the bomb. That is totally antiquated today. And I think you can buy Norman or these bomb sites on eBay so, for a few $100 now. But at the time, the bombardiers at the time were instructed if they were going to crash to put a number of bullets in the Norden bomb site. So that helped win the war. Another one was radar. The United States won radar. Developed by the British, and the U.S. was the one that was able to develop it. And the enemy was always concerned, hey, how are you seeing us through clouds? And wonderfully, the U.S. put out this thing. They didn't want to say confess that they had radar. It says we have put our pilots on a strict diet of carrots. And because of all of these, and that's where this idea that if you eat carrots, it improves your eyesight. It's this old propaganda. So radar was another way that helped us win World World War II. There was also the atomic bomb. Now, the atomic bomb was terrible. It killed hundreds of thousands of people. But we have a professor I'm aware of that's a specialist in World War II. His name's Jenkins. He's here at Baylor University. He said that ending the war early actually saved 11 million lives. He was talking about all of the enemies that Japan had in places like Manchuria and the prisoners of war, and basically the idea if they lost the war, they would shoot it. They would shoot the prisoners. So AI is a technology, and the smoke is out of the bottle. And if we don't develop it, other countries are going to develop it. And the person that dominates in technology is the one that's going to win wars. And I think even more importantly, give pause to people who are our adversaries because they're going to recognize that there is this power here. And because of this power, they're not going to mess with us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that definitely you cannot put a cap on AI research in the military, but you do have to keep it safe. You do have to vet it, and you do have to use it only when necessary, only when the OODA is too short that a human being can't respond.
Well, that's a problem, though. I mean, don't you think, Robert? Because what, a year or so ago, Elon Musk came out and he's like, "Hey, we need to take 6 months and just
Yep.
cool it here." Meanwhile, and I don't know if this is exactly the case, but Sam Altman's like, "Well, I'm going to get ahead during that time," you know. And then you've got other countries doing this, China, Iran, you name it, Russia, you name it. They're and this is a race. This is an AI race. And like you said, if you're not at the top of the hill, if you're not in the forefront of this, you're going to get left behind really quick. But
Exactly.
it's really causing, I think, this competitiveness that causes you to take risks, causes you to maybe because listen, you have some bad actors out there,
You do.
that are they're happy to take those risks. They're happy to throw it, who throw it to the wind. Who cares? Let's see what happens. Because we want something bad to happen anyways. You talk about viruses, that's the big thing. Antivirus software or whatever in the future is going to be an AI fighting another AI virus, So you've got this,
Yeah.
you've got this thing where it's like there's no stop. There's no
You know
stopping it.
what? You know what it is, Ryan. It's the arms race, and we've
Yes.
had the arms race throughout history. We've had the I don't know if you watch Dr. Strangelove, they talk about the missile gap, that the US has fewer missiles than Russia. And so now we're talking about the AI gap. And I think that there's always going to be gaps. And that's the problem with competition. That's the problem with the fallen nature of man. There are going to be people that want to dominate other people and are going to use it for evil. So the people that are on the side of good also need to develop this in order to make sure that the good wins out.
Yep. Well, what happens whenever the bad actors say, we're going to make sure that our offensive stuff causes their OODA to have to be so short, and they know that it's going to have to be so short. So now everything over on their side is going to be autonomous because it's going to have to be. There's no humans in the equation, and then one thing goes wrong. I know that's all
One thing
speculative.
goes wrong. Yeah, in fact, there was a case, gosh, it was a long time ago, where the Russians had this defense mechanism. It was during the Cold War, where I wish I remember more of the details, but the idea is that Russia had this idea that they wanted to develop a system which detected incoming U.S. missiles so that they can counterstrike. And the idea there was MAD, mutually assured destruction. There's some people that say AI is the worst thing that could ever happen in terms of destroying mankind. No, I think it's a thermonuclear bomb, probably. So they had this special detection capability, and there was a lieutenant that was in charge of this. And there was this little red light which would go on if the Russia was being attacked. And this red light came on, and man, there was a missile coming towards Russia. And then there was another missile. And then the system says you should launch a thermonuclear strike against the United States. But the guy thought about it, and this is important of creativity and domain expertise. He thought about it. He says, if the U.S. was trying to wipe us out, they wouldn't just send two rockets; they would send a whole bunch of rockets. So he didn't follow the requirement that he was supposed to launch a thermonuclear strike, and he didn't, and he was right. And later on, they found out that these false alarms came from reflections off of clouds. And so that was something which was not fully vetted. It wasn't vetted beyond a reasonable doubt. So certainly that was something that the Russians did, and they put it into practice too quick. And it could have resulted in something which is just catastrophic. But thanks to this one lieutenant,
Yeah.
he actually has a video on YouTube where they talk to him. Because of this one Russian lieutenant, we were able to stay out of war. So you're right. You know, things can happen, and there's always the black swan that
Yeah.
nobody anticipates.
Is there any way to fully vet? And I'm just asking your opinion on this. Is there any way to really fully vet an AI system whenever you don't really know what's going on between the input and the output, what's going on in here, how it's happening? Is there any way to really 100% know this is fully vetted, this is foolproof? I don't think that there is.
No, there isn't. Well, first of all, I don't think you can fully vet anything. I
Right.
think you can do it in a legal term beyond a reasonable doubt.
Sure.
And what you do is when you vet it, is you to test it for every scenario that you can think of, and even then some that other people think of. And if you vet it for that, and well, you know, that's is that enough? Well, that's the engineers. That's design ethics. In engineering, we have two sort of ethics. We have design ethics that make sure that what we design does what it's supposed to do and nothing else. And then there's the end-use ethics, which people decide whether to use the technology or not. So the design ethics is exactly that, to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do and nothing else. And you have to test it. You have to test it against every possible scenario.
Yeah.
So, but are you going to get all of the scenarios? Probably not. That's the reason you do the beyond a reasonable doubt sort of thing, which is enough to uh, falsely accuse somebody of murder, right? Because it's beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't have a foolproof legal system,
Right.
but I think it's a good way to talk about things. And when we talk about simple AI, such as the self-driving car, that's something that can be tested pretty reliably. We can put it in all sorts of different scenarios and test how it responds.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about these killer robots, the battlefield. What do you foresee in the future, 5, 10, 20 years down the road in terms of our military and how we deploy, forces? Are we, all of a sudden going to have robot armies? Any of this stuff? I mean, we're already seeing some of that for sure. What's your thoughts?
I, 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 I try not to forecast.
I
I,
understand.
I think Niels Bohr, who was one of the pioneers in quantum mechanics, says forecasting is dangerous, especially if it's about the future. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful when we're forecasting. Well, let me tell you one of my fears that has been put to rest. One of my fears used to be that we would be attacked by, say, 1,000 enemy drones, and these drones would be just attacking us. And how are we going to go? How are we going to get our pea shooter and boom, 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 and shoot them all out of the sky? And I thought, wow, this is something. But again, Ryan, it's an arms race. And what happens in the arms race is you come up with technologies to counter that. So here's the counter technology for an attack of 1,000 drones. There is something called an EMP. And you've probably heard of EMPs, where a thermonuclear bomb can be put up at the level of the space station in the United States and take out our power grid and stuff. And the reason is it puts on this pulse and it kind of fries all the electronics. Well, suppose that we could put an EMP on these 1,000 drones. Then we could fry all the electronics in the drones and we wouldn't have to worry about it. Well, it turns out the United States, China, and the Soviet Union have all developed what I call EMP cannons. So they can actually take an EMP cannon, and they can aim it towards a attacking drone of swarms and totally take it out, just like bug spray.
Yeah.
And so this is something which I had no idea when I was worried about the 1,000 drones attacking. I thought, my goodness, how are we going to defend against that? In fact, there were some movies, one with Morgan Freeman, "The President is Dead" or something like that, where they had this where they had this problem. And now we have an effective method of taking care of these drones. So you can talk about what's true and then what happens. And the thing is, you can never forecast human ingenuity. After World War II, for example, they would have asked people, what technology do we need to develop? Well, it turns out all the electronics back then were using tubes. So they would say, we need better filaments, more reliable. We need to get better vacuums inside the tubes, not realizing that semiconductors were coming down the pike to totally replace it. So I think that that's where we are with AI, and I think technology in general. We can make short-term forecasts, but anything which is long into the future doesn't take into account human human creativity and human ingenuity that can fight back on these things. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. There's important people that do it. I'm saying that I would suspect that it was not accurate more often than not.
Yep. And the next thing we had Jonathan Hollerman, UAP task force guy on, and next thing will be all this stuff will be able to be hardened against EMP, and then what'll be
Yes.
next, and yeah, it's just
No, you're exactly right. So that continues the arms race. So we use our EMP cannons against the drones. So what the drones do is they harden themselves, and so you make yeah, you make more hardened drones. So what do? You get a bigger EMP. What do you do?
yeah.
Maybe the EMPs that we have right now won't work, but maybe something else will. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the solution is, but you're right. And it is an arms race. It's technology overcoming technology, overcoming technology. This is something which has been happening since the dawn of time.
Yeah. Robot soldiers. Back in the, I forgot who bought them, but Boston Dynamics used to have
Oh,
some just
in,
incredible.
incredible optics. Yes.
Um, any of that stuff, like, can you, again, I know you don't like to speculate. I love that you brought up Niels Bohr, but any thoughts of, actual robot armies? I mean, those robots are pretty, pretty stinking awesome to watch.
Well, one of the things we have to take into account here is, well, let's see, Isaac Asimov. You familiar with him? He
Yep.
was a science fiction writer. He coined the term Frankenstein complex, and that was he was trying to coin an idea why people are afraid of mechanical men. He called it the Frankenstein complex. And if you look back at the original 1932 Frankenstein, he moved around kind of slowly. Why would you be afraid of that guy? I think that probably Mike Tyson could probably take him out with a couple of punches. It was he moved slowly. I guess he was strong, but I don't know why should you be afraid of him. So that was the Frankenstein complex, and that was the our tendency to identify things as humans. For example, we see faces all over the place. If you look at a plug that you plug in the wall, it looks like a face. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. It
Oh
looks
yeah.
like two eyes and a little mouth. And the reason is because when we're born, we're pre-wired to recognize faces because we want the baby to recognize mommy's faces and things of that sort. And that's the reason I see faces everywhere. You can look at things and you can see faces. So there this is this ability to again anthropomorphize, make these things more human. This is also captured in something called the uncanny valley effect. And the uncanny valley is it's a dip in a curve that really shows that people become more afraid of things which resemble humans than things which don't resemble humans. Now, about the robots, why are they so scary? It's because they resemble humans. They walk around, on two legs and stuff like that. Is that going to be the best soldier? I mean, shouldn't we have, two legs and maybe a wheel or something like that? I
Yeah.
don't know if it is the best technology for a warfighter, but because it resembles humans, we think, wow, this is really, really scary and this is going to replace people on the battlefield. And yes, maybe it will, but we do have to be careful about this idea of always anthropomorphizing everything in accordance to the Frankenstein effect and the uncanny valley effect.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it's amazing that Boston Dynamics developed, I forget the name of the robot, but man, I mean, it is moving around with a 50-pound backpack and it's doing backflips and it's navigating some pretty awesome courses. I don't know if that's like was pre-programmed back then. I don't know that it can just go out and do that on its own at any given day, but um, I mean, why wouldn't you want to have, and I don't know that ground battles are necessarily the fighting of the future either,
Yeah, that's going to be
So,
true. Yeah.
but I just,
What,
why wouldn't you have
where
it?
here's the thing. What if you had a robot that was on wheels that had this ability to also go upstairs and go up mountains and things like that by switching to some other mechanism, such as I don't know, something that grabbed into it and began to go up the hills. Would you be as afraid of that as you would of one of these Boston Dynamic robots? I don't think so. And
Right.
I think the reason that anything that departs from the human resemblance is something which is probably not as scary, even though it has the same capabilities. And this is the same problem that people looking at AI have. It's the word is anthropomorphization, where they actually look at this and uh, they tried to assign human attributes to it. That's the reason that we have hallucinations, for example. That makes it kind of a human being sort of thing, and that's baloney. It's just was programmed that way, and that's the way it responded. And they're going to have to put band-aids on it. So, yeah, we have to be aware of the anthropomorphization of artificial intelligence because this is what scares us. This is what generates the headlines, and this is what generates a lot of the fake news. Is trying to scare us into this fear of the Frankenstein complex.
I got you, man. Right around the corner, allegedly, I don't know if we're talking months, years, decades. Quantum AI, quantum computers connected with AI. That's on the horizon. There's a lot of people that are like, "Hey, AI right now where it stands, cool, get it." But once we get into quantum computing, connecting it with AI, um, then there becomes problems. What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, my thoughts on this are as follows. I mentioned Roger Penrose early in our discussion. And Roger Penrose made the incredible observation that there were things the computers couldn't do. And the things that it couldn't do were non algorithmic. In other words, computers can only generate computer code. Alan Turing showed back in the 1930s that there were problems that computers couldn't solve. He most famously did something called the halting problem, which showed that a computer program couldn't analyze another computer program to say whether it halted or ran forever. It wasn't a conjecture, it was a mathematical proof. So it's algorithms that prohibit AI from doing these things such as creativity, understanding, and sentience. And I would also say prohibit it from doing love, compassion, and empathy. I think those are obvious ones. Um, so since Alan Turing, there have been a number of problems which have shown to be non-algorithmic. Many of these were pioneered by people such as Gregory Chaitin, who is just a genius in terms of something called algorithmic information theory. There's a lot of things we can't do. We can't tell how short a large computer file can be compressed. There's no way to detect whether it's been maximally compressed using a given system. It's non-algorithmic. So there's lots of different things which a computer can't do. So we bring up quantum computers. If you take quantum computing, the first things that you learn are Shor's algorithm and Grover's algorithm. These are algorithms which are really, really good at solving problems, and I forget which one, but decrypting encrypted coding, finding the factorization of the product of large primes. But notice Shor's algorithm, Grover's algorithm. They are still algorithms, and they are still not going to be able to do things which are non algorithmic. And computers can't do that, and quantum computers can't do that. Another thing which I think is important is quantum computers. Anything you can do on a quantum computer, you could do on a regular computer. It might take a billion times as long, but nevertheless, you could. This is something called the Church-Turing thesis from Alonzo Church and Alan Turing, which basically said that anything that we could do on a computer today could be done on Alan Turing's original 1930s machine. And even the computers of the future, yeah, they could do it on Alan Turing's original machine. Again, it might take a million times as long. But if you can prove something doesn't work on today's machines, you can pretty well be sure that they don't work on tomorrow's super duper computers. And I would say that also includes quantum computing. So the fact that we are endowed by non-algorithmic traits such as understanding, creativity, and the obvious ones I think are love, empathy, and compassion, are going to take us out of this realm of problems. By the way, quantum computing has been around for a long time. I first heard about quantum computing 30 years ago, and people have been trying to crack the quantum computing thing. And you hear headlines every once in a while that somebody has so many qubits and stuff like that. But I see really nowhere where it's been reduced to practice. And that's the bottom line of success of a technology when it's been reduced to practice. Another thing, we think that quantum computing is going to replace our laptops. No, it's not going to replace our laptops in the sense that, we can sit down and do quantum computing on our laptops. It's a whole new different world. You have to set up a lot of dominoes before you knock them down. And it's very, very very specific in terms of the implementation. In fact, I just watched a YouTube video of a girl that got out of quantum computing for this reason. She said, "Yeah, we're just not cracking it." So I'm not saying that we never will crack it. I think it was Feynman who originally suggested the quantum computing, and everybody's been trying to do quantum computing for a heck of a long time, and we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe it's possible, maybe it's not possible. It's one of those things that you can't forecast. So am I worried about quantum computing and artificial intelligence? Well, no, not yet. I would like to see the algorithms that they were going to use. One of the things that the AI algorithms do is they consume a lot of energy, right? Using conventional computing, and maybe quantum computers can do this a lot quicker, and we won't have to use all this energy. So we'll see. I don't know. I think that the future is still out there.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting about quantum computing, like you said, a computer's a computer. Just this one might be a billion times faster. Um, when you get with AI, and obviously you're talking about, it's not going to have love, empathy, creativity, but it could be, that's what AI does. It's really good at mimicking, you know?
Oh yeah,
And whenever you're talking about being able to do something a billion times faster, you could probably come out with a really convincing model of empathy, love, you know, creativity. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people think it's creative right now. Um, just with like we talked about with music and whatnot, but whether it's not, but a lot of people think so. But I mean, when you're talking about something that's a billion times faster, I can see how, while it wouldn't be, it would be a very convincing alternative that people would think, hey, that's conscious. It's
sure.
or alive or whatever, even though it's not. I can see that happening with quantum computing for sure.
Have you ever seen the movie AI? It was directed by Steven Spielberg, and I think there was another important guy. But it's about this little boy robot,
Yep.
and it was done a number of years ago. But this little boy robot is somebody that parents would adopt.
Yeah.
And he was a little boy robot, and it was played by an incredible child actor. I think his last name is Osment. He was the one in the Sixth Sense.
Yep.
He was a little boy in the Sixth Sense, and he played the robot, and he did an incredible job. But he came in and he sat down, and he was like steel, and he just sat there without motion. And the person selling the robot said to the mother, "It says, once you push this button and he sees you, he will be in love with you forever." And she says, "Okay, that's what I want." She pushed the button, and Osment, great acting. He just kind of melted. He came from this steel thing to, "Oh, mommy, I really love you." And I tell you, there was this idea that you should, man, this boy was human. But no, he was a robot. And he was simulating his love. He was simulating his compassion. And was he feeling it? No, he wasn't. And so, yeah, are we going to be able to simulate stuff like that? Yeah, I think that we probably are. And if you want a hollow sort of relationship, get into a relationship with a robot like that.
Well, there's people doing it right now with Chat GPT.
Oh yeah,
They make up their whatever perfect person. I don't get it. I don't get it, Robert. I don't get it. But whatever floats your boat, I guess. Talking. There's a gentleman out there. You might have heard of him, Jack Safardi, and he is on the cutting edge of a lot of different things, including consciousness, the physics of consciousness, and all of that. Where there is a real physics, quantum physics, all this. There is a real push to understand consciousness at a mathematical and physics level. Um, and I wonder if in any way, shape, or form that could possibly at some point break it down into equations that we could then turn into algorithms where you could actually have a machine that becomes sentient.
okay. Well, let me address that. First of all, I'm aware of about six different levels of models of consciousness. One is quantum consciousness. Now, consciousness is and quantum consciousness. This is one of the things from Penrose's book. He's the one that I lifted a lot of the non-computable you with. He maintained that a lot of things in the world were algorithmic. So he thought, what in physics and things around this world are non-algorithmic? Because he was a materialist, he was a naturalist, he had no faith, and he thought, this is interesting. Okay, the only thing that I can think of that is non-algorithmic is quantum computing, or quantum. I shouldn't say quantum computing, but quantum collapse. So he says that there's a quantum collapse, and that's non-algorithmic. You can't predict it. There's no way to forecast it. So he got together with another guy named, oh gosh, I forget the other guy's name, but they came up with the something called the Ork-Or theory, which of human consciousness. This was, I don't know, 15 years ago, and it really hasn't had any traction. A lot of people have been talking about quantum consciousness, and maybe that's where we do get our creativity, but I've seen no traction on this. It's not something which I think lives in biology. I think it lives on PowerPoint slides as of late. Now, the models of consciousness, I know a few of them. One of them is panspermia. Panspermia believes that everything was made out, everything has consciousness, just like mass and color and everything else, properties. So this is my computer mouse, and this is a little bit conscious, according to panspermia. But I am blessed, and you are blessed with having a big concentration of consciousness in this panspermia model. I think that that's totally ludicrous, but there's some people that do that. A lot of people have looked at consciousness emerging from complexity. And this is the idea that as we get more and more and more complex, that pretty soon magically there will be consciousness, magically there will be sentience. And this is something which George Gilter, in his book, um, Gaming AI, he calls it rapture of the nerds. It is totally a faith. And there's really no evidence that as you get more and more complex, that you're going to get consciousness and all of these emergent sort of behavior. A big proponent of that's a guy named Tononi, who came up with an idea called integrated information theory. I just wrote a paper on this with a neurosurgeon that's going to be coming out pretty soon. And it's basically the idea that, yes, if you measure the information content in a special way of a system, you can actually measure the degree of consciousness. It's totally without merit. The other method, and this gets into a lot of philosophy, a little bit of theology, but I think a lot of science, is that the mind is separate from the brain. Is your mind separate from the brain? It used to be this lived on the shelves of philosophers such as Descartes and a number of other people. But recently, there has been some scientific evidence that indeed our mind is greater than the brain. There are philosophical arguments for this. We don't have time to get into it. I think one of the greatest evidences is near death experiences, which have been documented thousands and thousands of times about people who have been brain dead and body dead, and they still experience something. A big one was Pam Reynolds. She had a operation where her body temperature was lowered to 40 degrees. She was tilted. Her heart was stopped. They drained all of the blood out of her head because they had a very sensitive brain operation to do back there. And she came back with some incredible stories. And there's an entire scientific organization devoted to this. There's a book by Bruce Grayson called After, and he's a psychiatrist that spent his life studying near-death experiences and came away with the idea something's happening here which cannot be explained materialistically. And I'm going to advertise a book here, Greg,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
I recently co-edited a book called Minding the Brain. And Minding the Brain brings together some of the biggest psychologists, philosophers. We have a neurosurgeon, we have neuroscientists, we have computer scientists, computer engineering, all looking at the idea that the mind is greater than the brain, and consciousness is greater than the brain from different points of view, and it's pretty compelling stuff. So those are the arguments, and those people that believe that we are going to get this miraculous consciousness from increased complexity. Uh, I tell you, it's a faith. There's absolutely no evidence. They are going totally on faith, and they have they have their faith that indeed this is going to happen. Because if you're a materialist or naturalist, you have to go with one of these ideas.
Yeah. Very interesting stuff, man. And I appreciate you sharing that book. We're going to make sure that you show how people can get in touch with all your books. But I have one final question for you. This is
This is the
this is the
okay.
one.
That's the nightcap. Okay, Ray.
Um, there's a lot of folks out there that believe in some way, shape, or form AI is connected in some way, shape, or form, and or is primed to be or will be one day with elements of, for lack of a better word, let's call it another dimension. Okay. You get into spirituality, you get into this stuff that people see like on DMT and wherever, these different entities and whatnot that is allegedly supplying the conscious to AI. What's your thoughts? I mean, have you heard any of that stuff?
I think that's totally ludicrous. By the way, I teach a graduate course in multidimensional signal processing, so I know about multidimensions, and I know about the idea that there could be a fourth or fifth or sixth dimension, and we're being intercepted by this sort of stuff. But I tell you, this is totally ludicrous. All artificial intelligence is pushing around ones and zeros, just like all computing is,
Yeah.
and that's it. And there's no, I see no interjection of anything external from that, spiritual or otherwise. So,
All
I.
right.
By the way, this is the first I've heard about this. This is really weird.
The first you've heard about this? Come on.
Well, no, it is the first that I've heard about it. That it's kind of satanic or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems to be on the offset without looking at it deeper. It just seems to be a ludicrous proposition.
Yeah. Well, I've heard about it. Just like you said, there's a lot of the National Enquirer stuff out there. So
Exactly. And I would ask the people for evidence of this.
Yeah.
It's just like all of the fake stories. Show me evidence. Show me evidence. Show me the background of the reason that you believe that. I think for everything that I propose, I can show you evidence, and I can give definitions, and I can defend it from a intellectual point of view, not just magic.
I got you. How do people follow your work, get your books, all of that?
Okay, well, I'm the director of the Walter Bradley Center for Natural and Artificial Intelligence. And we have a website called mindmatters.ai. Politicians say you should always repeat the address 3 times. So mindmatters.ai, that's mindmatters.ai. And you can see some of my postings there, and we have a number of like-minded people, including professors of economics. We have a neurosurgeon that writes for us. We have a psychologist write for us, cognitive scientists which write for us, and these are people which are very well credentialed and experts in their field, and they have they have a viewpoint very, very similar to mine, that AI is overhyped, that it's going to be limitations, that it's going to be wonderful. It's going to change the world. It's going to change the way that people are employed. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be incredibly disruptive. But nevertheless, any new technology is incredibly disruptive, and we can't go back to the buggy whip factory. Okay, so there's things which AI is going to replace, and it's going to replace it. But I think also, as a great believer, we're getting to my politics now, as a great believer in the free enterprise system, I believe that AI is going to create more than it does, than it destroys. Because if you look now, my great-great-grandfathers were out plowing the field. I don't have to worry about plowing the field. I can sit here and have a podcast with you and have a lot of fun. And that's the way that AI is going to be. It's going to make our lives easier and more pleasant, and let us do things that we enjoy doing more and still make a living at.
There you go. I tend to agree with you.
Okay.
The biggest question though next is, of course, energy consumption, which is a whole nother can of worms, So
yeah,
energy consumption, man, a lot of energy. But you're right,
Yep,
man. Who knows? Maybe quantum AI does it better and more efficiently, and reduces the energy demands, or maybe we find 0 point energy at some point, and who knows? We'll see what happens.
Well, this is a big thing with DeepSeek. DeepSeek came out and they said, well, we're not going to tell you how we did. And there was a lot of speculation that they had come up with a better algorithm that didn't use the energy that ChatGPT did. And I think they're still secretive about that. I doubt that indeed that's the case. I think they probably got some DaVita chips under the table. But, there is always the idea of a new algorithm. We go back to the, technology. It's hard to forecast technology.
Yeah, there you go. It's a wild time to be alive, man. I appreciate you so much for coming on. This is awesome.
Well, thanks, Ryan.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Dr. Robert J. Marks II. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
What an incredible conversation with Dr. Robert J. Marks II, a true pioneer helping us understand what AI can and can never become. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video so more people can discover the Ryan Files. And if you'd like to go deeper, become an agent of the Ryan Files on Patreon at patreon.com/the Ryan Files. You'll get early access, exclusive aftermath content, and behind-the-scenes conversations that never make it to YouTube. You can also listen on the go on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And as always, you can find everything related to the show, every link, every episode, and every update at theryanfiles.com. You folks are awesome. Be amazing, be positive, and stay curious out there, my friends. And I'll see you next time right here on The Ryan Files.
Are you not curious?
Preparing to transfer the Ryan Files. Now.
I present to you, with great intrigue and wonder, the Ryan Files.